Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Kim Lappel. I'm the principal over at the middle school, and we're happy to be able to talk to you this morning. It might be cold and a little bitter, but we have two great guests, Mrs. Deborah Kay and Mrs. Lisa Pellegrino, who they're going to be talking to us about our mathematics and our science curriculums. Before they speak and present to you a lot of really important information, I just wanted to thank you all for your partnership and just touch upon what the inside of the middle school looks like, since I know that a lot of parents haven't been here for a long time, and now we've had to kind of shutter our doors and try to keep our kids safe. No one knows what lunch looks like. I want to thank you for talking to your children, because they are now really helpful in terms of meeting all of the guidelines that we had to really reinstitute at the onset now of this new variant. So if you go into our cafeteria, kids can still choose whether they eat in the cafeteria or they eat in the back gym. We also have another room that's available, and every student is 6 feet plus apart. So that means that if you go into our cafeteria, there are now only 3 students sitting at those round tables. If you know there are round tables, there are also other tables, other areas. They are all 6 feet apart. That is a mandate when they're eating, that they be 6 feet plus apart so that there's no quarantining and exposure potential. Once they're done eating, we allow them to put their masks up, and then they can be closer together. So with the colder weather, it has forced us to open up a couple more rooms. All of those guidelines are still being followed, and our kids are really working with us. And I will tell you, it is middle school is such a time for kids to learn how to be social and to learn how to where their agency is, meaning how do they interact with other students and other adults. And I think these formative years are so important for our students, and then asking them to sit 6 feet apart and to kind of live in somewhat of an artificial experience at times. We've been trying to find a balance all year, but I want to assure you that with all of these with the new variant and with the new guidelines, we have been, the kids have been working with us, and we've been extra diligent. In classrooms, our students have their masks on, and they are, again, 3 feet plus apart, and it meets all the guidelines that are required of New York State. Mr. Ancona, I want to give him a shout out and thank him very much. He has been really active and involved in terms of anyone that has, there's 3 ways that you can have remote instruction at the middle school or in the district. And that is if you tested positive, if you have symptoms, and we changed that to allow kids that are symptomatic to go remote because testing has been such a challenge. It was impossible to ask you to wait for that proof of testing. And then the third is if there's someone positive in your house that requires it. So those are the ways that we are allowing remote. Other circumstances, you can always reach out to me, but unfortunately, those are the 3 guidelines that I'm following. But we always want to make sure we support our kids. So as you know, I'll reach out to you and we'll figure out how to support your child if they are at home not feeling well for other reasons. And last piece is that the guidance is constantly changing right now. To make things more flexible and to allow our students to come to school when it is safe. So please be patient with us, but feel free also to ask questions to us when there's a situation involved that you're worried about a positive case or symptoms or exposure. Honestly, New York State has changed and Westchester County has changed their guidelines enough times that we quiz each other at the end of each day to make sure that we're on top of it. So this is all to make sure that our kids are safe while also making sure that they're in school, because we know how important it is to be in school, and it is great to see them every day. I also want to just remind everyone that in the spirit of our work, we are constantly working to achieve these 4 aspects of our students' experience, and that would be that they are active learners, that they take risks, healthy risks, that they embrace rigor, and that they have a balanced, healthy mindset. And we continue to strive for that each and every day at the middle school. Math and science, you'll learn more about how we're having our students be active learners, risk takers, and be challenged with rigor. overall, I want to let you know that we're quite pleased with XPOD and our SDL. If you're in 7th and 8th grade, and exploratory if you're in 6th grade, we feel like that's created a nice balance for our kids. We're constantly tweaking our schedule. So we will we'll seek to make sure that we're always giving them the support that they need. So without further ado, I think I'm going to hand this over to, it's Mrs. Pellegrino who's going to go first. So Lisa, thank you again so much for being here, and the stage is all yours.
So on our first slide, you will see our throwback picture there, and obviously you can tell it's a throwback picture because the students are not wearing masks. So that was taken during our first kind of soiree into the acceleration program. So that also gives you some context for where we are within the program, right? Because at this point we're several years in, and the picture might look a little bit different. This is probably the most salient slide for everyone, which tells you our two different acceleration pathways, with one being in the middle school and one being in the high school. So students will come to HCC, and all students coming in will take Math 6. And within that 6th grade program, we have tiered assignments that are there to both push students with a challenge, but also help students that might need additional support for any particular unit. And we have an additional teacher, Robson Letsky, that will come into classes, work with students, again, students that might need additional support or students that can be pushed further. All students from 6th grade go into Math 7. And again, there you will see tiered assignments, but you will also now start seeing versioned assessments. And you can see that on the portal. So the teachers will put comments in. So if you're a parent wondering, how do I know what type of assessment my student is taking, or if they're doing the additional criteria for acceleration, that's something that you can take a look at in the portal. At the end of 7th grade, the teachers will recommend the first cohort of students to be accelerated. And the thing that is important to understand is that the first pathway is there really with the top purpose being that students will be able to take BC Calculus at the end of their senior year. So a common misconception that parents might have, especially if it's their first child coming through middle school, is, oh gosh, if my child doesn't get accelerated, they're never going to be able to take AP Calculus their senior year, which is not true. So students that will take the AP Calculus AB, and just so that folks have an understanding of the difference between AB and BC, BC is 2 semesters of college calculus, and AB in that green pathway is 1 semester of college calculus. So I actually have just finished my rounds at the high school going to talk about the different course offerings. And the one thing I say to the students is that BC Calculus, there's really only 2 colleges that I can think of. If you're going to be an engineering major at MIT or Caltech, that I would say BC is certainly requisite for. But otherwise, it is not requisite to study at other schools, even if you're studying engineering. And we actually have had students go on to study engineering from AP Calculus AB, from non-AP Calculus, and we've even had students that came from our yellow pathway in pre-calculus go on to study engineering as well. So that first pathway will have a smaller cohort relative to the second one that will go through and study in our A pathway. So they'll take Algebra 1A as an 8th grader. So that's their first high school course that will go on their transcript. And they'll continue on into that pathway. The best analogy I give parents for the blue pathway is it's like a broken clock that changes time quicker than a normal clock would. And as students go further on in the pathway, that clock kind of speeds up, so to speak, so that we are able to get them exposed to all of the content in BC Calculus their senior year. So if you'll notice, the 11th grade course is not Pre-Calc A, as the other ones kind of have just that A distinction, but rather it's called Pre-Calc / Calc A, because half of that course is traditional pre-calculus, but half of it is actually the AP Calculus AB curriculum. So that pathway moves quickly. It requires a lot of independence on the student's part, and a lot of fluidity with kind of the foundational mathematical skills that students would have gained up through and including that point. The majority of students will go on to pre-algebra in 8th grade. Again, they'll be exposed to tiered assignments and be working with the teachers to choose the assignments that are the best challenge for them in that moment. Then they will come into 9th grade. And from there, they'll go into Algebra 1 and again have our tiered assignments. So similar to 7th grade, there'll be different versions and different extensions that the students can do. And then at the end of that year, we will have the teachers make recommendations for the second pathway for acceleration. And that we typically will colloquially say that's our main pathway for acceleration. And those students, we would be looking to go into AP Calculus AB or non-AP Calculus senior year. If students are not in that cohort 1 and not in that cohort 2, then they would go on with a fairly traditional high school mathematics pathway. They would take geometry as a 10th grader, Algebra 2 Trig as an 11th grader, and culminate in pre-calculus senior year. So Kim, if you can get us to the next slide, I'm going to talk to us a little bit about that 3 and 2 pathway or that green pathway from the previous slide, just so you understand what goes into that course, why it's named what it is, but what content is there. So what we did when we created this 3 and 2 program was looked at the standards for geometry, Algebra 2 Trig, and pre-calculus. We said what standards are needed for the SAT, ACT, what standards would be needed for science so that Deb K and her folks can make sure that students are prepared for their science classes, and then what standards would students need to know for calculus. In combination, we looked at the New York State standards, we looked at other local and national standards, and that's how we created the 3 and 2 program. If you'll notice, the names of the 3 and 2 courses are Trig/Algebra 2 and Pre-Calc.
Things that you might want to be aware of. A lot of this information, because I see people taking vigorous notes. This all will be sending out another copy of this presentation to everyone, but we also have this information on our website. If you go to HCC, and then if you go to mathematics, you'll see that there is the information about a lot of these presentations and the rubric and the information that the 7th grade teachers use when they're deciding students' placement for 8th grade. So all 6th, 7th, and 8th grade all have those differentiated assignments, those enriched opportunities for all of our students. In 7th grade, I know that the mathematics teachers have met with their students in order to make them aware after the end of the first quarter of these different opportunities. And then they work with students and they keep track of how students are doing. And they encourage them to be challenged, and they encourage them to do what is successful for each individual student. And I think everyone would be impressed with just how well our 7th grade math, all of our teachers know our students, but 7th grade math teachers spend the entire year giving students opportunities to be independent learners and thinkers, while also having those supports necessary to encourage students to move forward at the pathway that also meets their needs. And I think that's important. And I want to assure everyone that that has been such an important piece for us, is that we know that students need to be independent and we want them to have the opportunities, but we also know that we have to provide them with the support to make good decisions.
So commonly people will look at this and go, it's Trig Algebra 2. So does that mean my child's not going to get exposed to any geometry? What about for the SAT? That course does have a good amount of geometry in it. The reason that we didn't put geometry in the name, Dr. Kaltenecker and I actually went through several iterations of the name for this course with a lot of parent focus groups. And the reasoning behind this particular name is so that if a student went originally through the A pathway and decided that wasn't the right pathway for them and they wanted to move into the green pathway, what we didn't want to happen was for a college to look at their transcript and say, were they taking geometry twice? So that's really what the naming was around. And we felt we could get our message across through the course description. So if a college looks at the course description, they can see that the geometry elements are in there, but it doesn't negatively impact students that would move down. So we take the most salient information that students would need to be successful in science on standardized tests and calculus. What does that mean for the teachers? It might mean that some of their favorite topics from more of a traditional geometry class might not be put into the course, but it doesn't mean that the students are missing out on content that they need. Okay, so we looked at really what is the most important content, and we put that together into a 2-year course. So on the next slide, what you will see is the pathway criteria for HCC for the first pathway. So again, this is only for that first pathway that would culminate in BC Calculus by the end of a student's senior year. So we're looking for successful performance on the in-class quizzes, and that starts Q2 on. So we do have Q1 kind of as a buffer for students getting used to the program, make sure that they understand the expectations. And then we're looking for that successful completion of kind of the standard class quizzes. Then we're also going to look at the extension questions that we offer as part of the quizzes, and also just some of the in-class work and assessments that students would have. And those extension questions, if you're wondering, like, what does that look like? That's going to push a student's thinking either in depth or in breadth. So sometimes it'll go deeper into a 7th grade standard, and sometimes it'll tie into an appropriate 8th grade standard, because that's really what we're looking to see if a student can successfully handle. Because like I said, the 8 pathway is like a broken clock. So in Algebra 1A, they're actually going to get some more advanced algebra topics in that course that are above grade level. Geometry A will be above grade level, because by the time they get to their junior year, they're clearly doing things above grade level with the AP Calculus, and then senior year would be well beyond grade level with the BC Calculus. So we want to make sure that they're able to be successful throughout that whole program. We're also looking for that standards feedback to be a meet, making sure that students are able to keep up with the level of work that would be asked of them in that A pathway. And that's what also ties into our strong student skills that we're looking for as well. So just making sure students can do their work on time, in accordance with the instructions that are there, show their mathematical thinking sufficiently, and we would definitely like to see them do that without the use of a tutor or a peer. So what we never want is for a student to be in a class and have to be tutored to stay in that class. The end goal of all of our mathematics courses in our program in general is really for students to have a positive relationship with mathematics and to feel that they can feel success in whatever course they're in, whether that's Algebra 1A, Pre-Calc 12, doesn't matter. Our end goal is to make sure that students have a positive experience with math. So the last slide that I have there is just to let you know what we're seeing in our courses. So the greatest thing that has come about in the past, I'll say 4 or 5 years, not only in our work in our revised acceleration, but also our work with our consultant that the teachers have worked with for about 5 years now, is students embracing this idea of multiple approaches to problem solving. So as opposed to saying, okay, this is how you do it, you just do these steps and that's it. Well, this is how I looked at it, right? And this is how I approached the problem, but another person at my table did something differently. As Kim said, we're looking at students being able to self-assess. And I know the number one question that Kim gets and Angelo gets is, well, how are we expecting students to accurately self-assess as 7th graders? And the answer, as Kim said so eloquently, is that they're working with the teachers doing that. This is not like we're just going to take them, throw them out into the sea and hope that they can swim, but we're there working with them and making sure that they're making good choices, because that's a skill that really transcends beyond the mathematics classroom and beyond the classroom in general. Our teachers in turn have developed an incredible amount of flexibility. Obviously, COVID has taught all of our teachers to be flexible with ever-changing requirements and things that go on in the classroom, but our instruction has also become exceptionally flexible to be able to meet students wherever they are at that current moment in time. And then in turn, what we're seeing is students that are comfortable pushing themselves. And again, that pushing themselves can manifest in going beyond grade level, but it can also manifest in a student that didn't think they would be able to solve a particular problem, and were finally able to. So like I said, some students we will see going beyond grade level that are ready for the challenge. But at the end of the day, the thing that we want to make sure is that all students are developing that positive relationship with mathematics. And then I just have a closing picture there, which was our original kind of mathematics team that put this together. It's still to this date the only picture I have that the teachers are unmasked. So hopefully at some point in the not too distant future, we can take another picture, perhaps with the 2022 bulletin board in the background. But you can see clearly their excitement over this program.
And I want to emphasize what Mrs. Pellegrino had said. Our intention is to make sure that each child is challenged appropriately and is having a great relationship with mathematics and feeling challenged, but also feeling that they have the opportunity to be successful. And that's a fine balance that we have to dance with our students. But our teachers do make an incredible efforts and just connections with our students to understand what they need and how as they move forward. So Mrs. K, our science guru. Thank you, Mrs. K.
Thank you, Ms. Lappo, and good morning, everyone. It's really nice to see you all. Thanks for tuning in to learn more about our science and math programs at HCC and beyond. I'm going to start out with just speaking a little bit about what the science department's philosophy is, and that our teachers have a shared value in facilitating learning environments because they want to guide students in an atmosphere of inquiry and discovery and help them grow as scientifically literate thinkers and learners. So what does that mean? Well, what it means is that we teach science in what you'll typically hear as in 3 dimensions. Probably around 5 or 6 years ago, if not more, nationally, the scientific community came together and developed what is known as the Next Gen Science Standards. New York State adopted them a few years ago, and they are not being implemented in terms of assessments yet, but we have been implementing them at HCC in a hybrid model, along with the current standards that we assess with the New York State test that we currently give at the end of 8th grade, whether the students are taking Science 8 or whether they're taking Earth Science. And that will make a little more sense after this presentation. But science in 3 dimensions is basically what do scientists and engineers do? What do science and engineers know? And what do scientists and engineers, how do they think? So that's kind of what our focus is in the science department. And the way that we do that is we start in 6th grade. And in 6th grade, our students have a focus on physical and chemical sciences, where it's like science in the physical setting, where they learn things like forces, motion, Newton's laws, and they learn basic chemistry. Then they go on to Science 7. And in Science 7, it's our life science program, where they do a deep dive into all the different things of all the different aspects of learning biology and about living things, including things outdoors, the human body. And it's a very rigorous life science program, which prepares them very well for the next level of science that they take in the living environment at the high school. It's at that particular point that you'll see in the 7th grade that we do an analysis of students' skills and development, which is one of the 3 dimensions, is that we look at what are the skills that students have with respect to engineering and science. What happens in 7th grade is that the teachers start looking at the behaviors as indicators for readiness in science acceleration to determine if it would be a best fit for students to go into Earth Science, which culminates in a Regents exam where students can get 1 credit of high school science, or if they should remain in an on-level Science 8 program. And these are the 5 behaviors that we focus on. And these behaviors are rated. And based on the ratings of those skills, the students, along with their classroom average in math and science, it's put together in a rubric, and it helps guide the decision as to whether or not they're, like I said, a readiness for the students to accelerate. So if you look at this particular slide, you'll see, like I said, in Science 7, the opportunity for acceleration and advancement exists, where based on the readiness, the students can go on to Earth Science in 8th grade, or they could remain in the on-level track of Science 8. Now, like I mentioned with Ms. Pellegrino mentioning this earlier in this presentation, there is sort of a misconception that the students get locked in on this path if they don't get placed into earth science in 8th grade. And I just want to provide a myth buster that that's not accurate, and here's some reasons why. As I mentioned previously, the key word in this is readiness, and we spend a lot of time looking at different indicators to make sure students are placed in courses where they feel that they can succeed. And success comes with a whole different comes with all different factors that we all look at differently. But here's where I think it's important for people to understand that when a student goes from 7th grade into 8th grade, their first 5 or 6 weeks of their 8th grade experience, the teachers spend time evaluating the students. And if at any point the teachers feel that the students are misplaced, whether they feel like they are not in the right place and they should be challenged more, they will be put into a higher level. If the teachers feel like the students are maybe struggling, there'll be conversations with parents, guidance counselors, and Ms. Lappel and Mr. Ancona, and everyone will collaborate together and try to assure that the students are placed in the most appropriate place for them to feel successful, so they can continue on in their science journey as scientifically literate thinkers, where they're able to inquire and discover and think and act like scientists. So I just want to make sure people understand that there is no lock-in. There's a lot of flexibility and constant reflection to make sure that students have opportunities to be placed in the most appropriate course for them. So after 7th grade, whether students are placed in Science 8 or Earth Science, they have assessments at the end of these years. At the end of Science 8, there's the intermediate level science exam, which is a New York State science test. And then there is the physical setting Earth Science Regents exam, which the students, if they take it in 8th grade, get 1 transfer credit that goes towards their high school science requirements. Now, if a student takes Earth Science in 8th grade, they can go on to take Living Environment Regents Biology A. The A stands for acceleration, meaning they took it a year earlier than some of their grade level peers, or the A can also stand for advancement, meaning that the curriculum is more, that they go into more depth and they may go at a faster pace to cover more material. Then usually the trajectory, once the students are in the advanced track, they go on to follow it in the blue row. And if you notice where we go into, they would take physical chemistry A, and then after their 10th grade year, if you look up at the top, the stars, ASR stands for Authentic Science Research Program. That program is our nationally recognized science research program. We could just briefly review. The other day we had an announcement, and the numbers on this slide actually changed, and we have 4 more students to be added to our semifinalists. So a great round of applause for Byram Hills. This is an outstanding program that is internationally recognized, and it's one of our flagship programs at Byram Hills, and we're really proud of it. The students start considering this program. Actually, they can start considering it in 7th grade, because we do a partnership where the science research teachers and students collaborate with the classes, and they pop in and they do some presentations as sort of a teaser to get the students interested in the program and tell them what it is, so they can start having their eyes on it and thinking about the possibilities of pursuing that type of research when they get to high school. At the end of 9th grade, well, actually right around now, when students start building their schedule, they start thinking about, what do I want to do? Do I want to take science research, or do I want to take global scholars? And then at the end of 9th grade, the students can then opt to take science research, which I just pointed that out as the stars at the top of the presentation. You can see that it's a 3-year program that begins in 10th grade once they choose it in 9th grade. And then it goes for 3 consecutive years, and they take it in addition to their other science core classes. So technically it could be considered an elective because it's not part of the core requirements and the students elect to do it, but it's a very rigorous program, and the opportunity exists to get college credit from the State University of New York at Albany. So that's what those stars up at the top are indicative of, and that's why they are over the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade year. So in 10th grade, if I go back to that, students can take chemistry, or if the students took Science 8 in 8th grade, they go on to take Earth Science in 9th grade. And then there's a fork in the road here. And if you notice, there is in the first row, there is a red box with an arrow around the Earth Science, because this is another opportunity or point of entry for students to excel, for students to advance. They're not going to accelerate because obviously there's no way for us to fast forward time, but they can take an advanced version of living environment biology if they opt to participate in the application process and their teachers recognize a readiness. Then they can go from the physical setting Earth Science Regents course in 9th grade and take Living Environment Regents Bio A, which would mean advanced. The only thing people have to recognize in this particular case is these 9th graders would be going into a living environment biology class with 9th grade students that are coming up from HCC as 8th graders that had taken Earth Science the previous year. And I know that this is a lot of verbiage and a lot of conversations and talk, but you know, we're always available to tease this out and help clarify understandings by reaching out via email and just, you know, giving us a call. So this point of entry exists for advancement if they follow this track. And after 10th grade or 11th grade, there's chemistry and physics. And our science department really feels strongly that students at least take all 4 core science classes before they graduate high school. And there's multiple pathways to do that and multiple opportunities to do that. And when I say the core courses, it's Earth Science, Biology, Chemistry, and Physics. So if you look at this chart on the science pathway, see where it says science electives? That's very generic, and we left it that way for a reason. And on slide 11, you can see that these show our electives. So our electives include our AP courses. We offer AP courses in Biology, Chemistry, and Physics C. This year, we are introducing an AP course that we've never had before, which is AP Environmental Science, and we're really excited about that. As I mentioned previously, our Authentic Science Research Program is an elective. We have electives in robotics, and then we also have a Science, Technology, and Society program that we have implemented at the high school a few years ago, which has different module courses, and they're semester-long courses, and they're interchangeable. And here is the list right here. And you can see the list has a large variety of electives available to students based on interest. Now, I should mention that instead of me kind of speaking at you and going over all of these electives, there are places on our website, excuse me, that are available, which is in the guidance tab on the Byram Hills High School website. There's our course selection booklet, and in our course selection, I think it's called course selection materials now because it's an online version. It's no longer a hard booklet. But if you go there, you could see all the prerequisites and all the course descriptions for these courses, and the different visuals that you saw in this presentation also exist. What we want students to become, as I mentioned when we first began this presentation, is our science department values that students are going to be scientifically literate and really enjoy inquiry and discovery, which is the scientific way. And you'll hear students and teachers talk about phenomenon, and you'll hear students and teachers talk about claim evidence reasoning. These are all the things that we do in our classroom as we facilitate learning for students to become scientists and think and act like scientists. And this is what we mean when we teach science in 3 dimensions. This is just a brief overview of the 3 dimensions, and you can see it's authentic phenomenon problem solving. So a phenomenon would be an example of, why do leaves fall off trees? We would throw that out there, and then we would design our learning environments around that so students can do research and try to determine why that is, and that's going to drive their learning and their problem solving. And they will then learn what scientists and engineers do, what scientists and engineers know, and how scientists and engineers think. So some of the things we focus on are patterns, cause and effect, and we want to have students, make the connections, and all at the same time, practicing their skills of asking questions and defining problems, developing and using models. So this reference slide is helpful to kind of provide an overview of the core values of our science program. I think I just, was showing the scientific and engineering practices because these are the skills of how scientists behave. And I highlighted using mathematics and computational thinking to just connect it back to what Ms. Pellegrino, was speaking about, and show how we do work very closely together in the math and science program to align our curriculum and make sure students have all the prerequisite knowledge they need in order to succeed, because there is a strong connection between science and math and the approach. And I think the last slide, which is slide 18, just reiterates what I said before, which is this is available not only on HCC's website, but if you want more information about the high school program, because that will somehow help you create the pathway or the flow chart through the journey of your child's high school, middle and high school experience in science. This is just guiding you to where you could find this information. And of course, if you ever need any other information, we are always available via email, phone call, and we could always set up a Google Meet.
In terms of our philosophy at the middle school, I hope everyone knows that in all of our courses, we want to make sure that we provide multiple opportunities for students to engage in the rigor. And as your children move through the middle school and go to the high school, there's not really an accelerated path in the middle school for English language arts or social studies, but we do provide differentiated assignments and experiences for your children. When they hit high school, there will be other pathways in the humanities for your son or daughter if that's of interest. So if your child right now really enjoys the humanities, know that that also will be available. And we'll ask both Mr. Smith and Mrs. Stahl and Mrs. Layden to attend a principal's coffee in the future so you can learn about the opportunities in the high school for your children in the humanities. First of all, thank you, Mrs. Kay, and thank you, Mrs. Pellegrino, for this presentation. It's always so thoughtful, and it's impressive the work that's put forward with the teachers to make sure that our children are challenged and thinking critically and cared for. So thank you. But I hope it's been good to see everyone, and thank you for attending. If there are any questions, you can always reach out to any of us. What about the beginning years? So I can ask Ms. Pellegrino or Mrs. Kay to speak about the 6th grade mathematics and science experiences specifically. Again, you're going to see that there's a parallel experience in both of those disciplines in terms of providing extension opportunities and challenges in addition to opportunities to support students. And this is something maybe before I pass it off, I'd let everyone know. In addition to all the enrichment opportunities that we want to make sure are available to our students, we understand that foundational mathematics and conceptual understanding in science is critical for our students. So when necessary or when it's appropriate or when a student needs it, we always have opportunities for academic supports that are taking place in English language arts, that are taking place in math, to make sure our students have that foundational understandings to move forward and be successful in 7th grade, 8th grade, and beyond. So I now will ask if, Lisa, can you just talk a little bit about the 6th grade math program, and then I'll pass it off to you, Deb.
Sure. So the 6th grade program has quite a lot of extension of the students' work in fractions from elementary school. So it kind of wraps up that kind of number system and those standards, and then starts the pathway for the middle school in ratios and proportions. So 6th grade is really a key link between the students' elementary school experience and then what their experience in middle school will be. So we have again, we have the Math 6 program that does have the tiered assignments. We also put elements of rich tasks throughout the year, either through a lesson or as a standalone topic or standalone activity. And just so folks know what I mean when I say rich tasks. So rich tasks are those that kind of naturally differentiate for students. So we say low floor, high ceiling problems that allow students to access the mathematics at any level. And they also, we have this term math residue. They leave math residue with the students, meaning there's mathematics that stay with them that find their ways into other parts of the mathematics throughout that particular year. So that's a nice way for students to get naturally challenged by the course material. And then we also have Mr. Senlensky, who pushes into our 6th grade math classes, both for remediation, but also for additional challenge. So there's all sorts of ways that students in grade 6 would be challenged before we have that formal stratification of assignments that students would see in 7th grade. I hope that answered the question, but let me know if you want anything further.
Deb, do you want to talk a little bit about science and how we challenge our learners?
Sure. So in science, what's a little bit different is that when students come up from WAMPUS, they actually come to HCC and have science as their first course as a standalone course. And that's very unique for them because they're used to learning science woven in with ELA, math, and social studies, as well as their other academics in their elementary environment. So the students love coming up and having science as a standalone course because that's one of the first times where they have an extended period of time to actually do real authentic laboratory experiences and hands-on learning. And that's where the inquiry and discovery can continue, and it's much deeper than it probably was when they were in their elementary setting for a whole host of reasons. In addition to having science as a standalone course, what that means is now they have science materials and resources that are just science specific. So that could be anything from their textbook where it's not even, they have like a workbook that is accompanied by an online supplement, and it's Savas, which is formerly Pearson Prentice Hall. And it's all about like the physical setting, as I said before, which is, chemistry and physics-based science. So that's pretty significant in terms of the difference between the elementary grades and the middle school setting in 6th grade, and that's the transition to 6th grade. And I think I briefly mentioned that in our 7th grade, we have a very rigorous life science program that is laboratory based, where the students do a lot of different experiments and labs in life science. So they do things like sponge pets when they investigate genetics, and they look at, Punnett squares and how different genetic traits come about, and they design a little sponge pet based on that. They use microscopes for a whole host of things. They look at, they do an experiment where they look at different types of how the egg breaks down over time in different types of media. So it's a very rich learning environment in 7th grade with life science as the topic. And I think the best way to think of science is that there are certain subjects through which the teachers facilitate learning and really encourage the students to engage in those skills, which are the science and engineering practices, which help students think and act like scientists. So those skills are developed through learning about chemistry and physics in 6th grade, the living environment or biology in 7th grade, and then earth and space science in 8th grade.
Thanks, Deb. Thank you. There were 2 other questions that I saw, and thanks, Lisa. The first question was, how strict is the criteria for advancement in math and science? So the criteria is in place, and it has worked in sense of giving us a very strong understanding of whether a child is prepared for the challenges of that accelerated course. So we are rather, we do hold true to that criteria. That being said, there are there are examples of when a student might show tremendous growth in the second half of the year and decide that, and actually show the student skills necessary that they might not have shown at the beginning of the year. That would be something that we would have to take into consideration. There could have been something going on at home that impacted their ability. In each case, we have to assess, do they have the foundational understanding to move forward and be successful in the program? And do they have the habits and skills that are required to be successful in the program? And sometimes they might have some and not the other. And in that case, we would have a conversation with that child and with parents to say, here's our worries and here's our concerns. Because the criteria we've set have been tried and true. We have worked through them. And for the most part, they're really good indicators to show us if a student's prepared or not. But again, that being said, we're here for the kids. So if there are reasons why we think a child might be successful and didn't meet a small portion of that criteria, we'll always have those conversations. Hopefully that answered your question. And then when you look at students in mathematics going from 7th grade to 8th grade, that the A track that leads you to BC Calc, I'd say that a rough estimate, you have about 20 to 25%, usually 20% of the students at that point shift into the Algebra 1A. And then I'd say there's another 20, 25, Lisa, you might speak to this, after 9th grade that shift into the accelerated pathway. So, but out of the middle school in 7th grade to 8th grade in math, I would say it's about 20% as a rough estimate. And then in the science to earth science percentage, between 35 to 45% of the students will take earth science. And I really want to reinforce what Mrs. K said, that in earth science, our 8th grade has a month of time where we really take a hard look at our students, and the curriculum is running parallel so that we can easily make a switch. And often parents will say to me, Kim, really, how many kids do you shift? There are shifts each year where teachers always want to give kids an opportunity to move forward and make sure that they're challenged. And a lot of growth happens between 7th and 8th grade. So we use this time to make sure that our placements are accurate and correct, and that our students are in a place where they can be successfully challenged. Any other questions? I know it's our hour is winding down. And again, thank you everyone for coming today. You can always reach out to any of us with any other questions. I'd say stay safe and stay healthy, but also make sure that you take good care of yourself and you're happy as well. So my best to everyone, and we'll see you again at the next Principal's Coffee in March. Thank you.